The ZTE Axon, or Axon Pro depending on where you're buying it, is a 5.5-inch Android challenger that's coming in at a very aggressive price point for its specs. It's got an aluminum design, which is, well, a lot better than a lot of the other plastic phones out there that come in a similar price point. It's looking to take on the flagship devices of the likes of LG and Samsung, but at $200 less. Let's find out how this stacks up. The ZTE Axon costs $450 upfront, unlocked, without a contract. So you're looking at about $200 less than other brand name Android phones of the likes of LG and Samsung. The Axon is a combination of high-end and mid-range specifications. The Snapdragon 810 processor with 4 GB of RAM is impressive, but it gets hot and delivers, well, mixed benchmark results because when you run the same benchmark and it gets hotter, the performance worsens. This is pretty standard, but the swing seems higher than in previous generation processors. And this is a problem that the Snapdragon 810 is actually well known for. The display is 5.5 inches with a very high resolution of 1440 by 2560 with a PPI of 534.
What we have here is a QHD display that is decently bright for outdoor viewing. It also has half-decent viewing angles. My one issue with the display isn't that you can't read it outside, because it is generally bright enough to do that. It is the auto brightness. It actually will just suddenly kind of turn way down so you can't even read it, and then in the most almost inconvenient moments boost all the way up. It hasn't been something that I've been able to replicate on camera, but it's a glitch that I'm hoping will go away in the future.
On the rear, you'll find a 13-megapixel shooter with a 2-megapixel secondary camera that lets you refocus after the fact. We've also got a fingerprint sensor that works but takes, well, half a second too long for my liking. And you can also choose to unlock the handset with your eyes, which also you have to wait maybe a second or two longer than you'd like. For a device that's touting itself as a flagship at an affordable price, the dimensions are also quite mid-range. It's a little thick at 9.3 millimeters and it weighs in at a hefty 175 grams. When walking around the device, the buttons are a little thinner than the thickness, which makes them feel, well, a little insubstantial, actually. Since I am reviewing the Chinese version here, there actually are a few differences. This comes without a camera button, but it does offer up dual SIM capabilities with the option to turn one of those SIM card slots into a micro SD card slot for expansion.
When it comes to the software, I don't have that many good things to say because I'm reviewing the Chinese version. It is heavily modified. The version that's shipping in the US is a lightly skinned version of Android, but what we have here is something with no app drawer, no access to Google services. So I have been able to download these Google apps here, but I haven't been able to get Google Play working. I sideloaded this on and it just kind of cycles through and doesn't connect. So you're going to actually have to do a lot to get this running. So I actually quite like what's going on with the notification bar here. You can activate your data off the 2 different cards. You can have a flashlight right there, NFC, your dual SIM settings. You can put it straight onto dual do not disturb, long standby as well, right? It's kind of like tones everything down. So when we check out the settings, it almost feels like an easy or like an old people setting because the buttons are also big. If we head on into all, that's a little more familiar. I do like that you can change the navigation key, so you can switch that back around. Sky Eye actually will let you unlock the screen with your eyes. Karaoke, so you can actually use the handset as a karaoke machine. Mi Pop, so this is actually a gesture control. It's very popular here in Asia.
In the Chinese version is the OS. It's a heavily skinned version of Android and you don't have access to Google services. You can download a pack from the ZTE shop, but even when you download the Play APK, it still blocks it. And the ZTE store doesn't offer up apps like Twitter and Facebook. You can install Nova Launcher to get your app drawer back, but you're going to have to put on Cyanogen if you're really planning on using this outside of China. If it's possible for you to look past the lack of Play, Twitter, and Facebook, the OS is actually quite snappy, fluid, and offers off a lot of features. When looking at the display, pixel per pixel, it goes toe-to-toe with the LG G4. But more important than density of pixels is the brightness of the LCD. ZTE went with one of Sharp's TFT LCDs, which actually went toe-to-toe with the LG G4, but it's not surprising that no one's able to surpass Samsung's AMOLED display these days. If you put up the LG G4 against the ZTE Axon, absolutely, it is much less in price, but you are getting the things that you pay for in a high-end flagship with the LG G4. You have that premium leather back, you have one of the best cameras in the industry, and you have a really great designed phone. If we take a look at the Samsung S6 or the S6 Edge, which we have here, Samsung's display is gorgeous. The form factor is beautiful. The ZTE Axon speaker grills, the top and the bottom of the phone, don't accurately reflect what you hear from the phone. It looks quite badass, but to be honest with you, it's not really good for listening to music, and even speakerphone calls could be a little bit louder. But if audio quality is important to you, it does come with a great pair of JBL earphones, which are valued at $50. Put those in, and that actually is good for making voice calls.
So when we have it in, so you can actually access that camera when you have it in SLR mode. So you can change the focal length here, zoom in. In general, I have been very pleased with how this camera is working. So this is outside in the rain. You can see how it's actually catching the raindrops. Here's a little bit of a video down at the beach. Here's a 360 on that. So this is actually down in Taidong, where I was for the weekend. So the optical image stabilizer isn't that solid on this, it's just okay. But I was pretty impressed with how the greens actually came through. If we keep on looking at some of these photos, it's actually not too bad. Oh, so here's a photo of a guy using a payphone. I never thought that would happen. But this actually did a half-decent job about taking pictures. I wouldn't say this is the best camera that I've come across on a phone, but it's definitely half-decent. I mean, you can see over here we've got kind of the light rays. So you can actually head on into the article. Oh, and I took some selfies here also. There we go. So overall, I would have to give the camera an average rating. It does the trick and has a half-decent interface. So I've been very satisfied with the battery life here. If we check out usage, it's been 5 days, 1 hour. Generally, I haven't been using it that much, only because it doesn't have Facebook and Twitter. But I have been doing a lot of my email on it, and I've been listening to some music through the headphones, not through the speakers. Generally, I haven't been using it that much, but 5 days on standby with GSM on actually is pretty impressive.
So what's the verdict on this handset? Well, the Axon's camera is decidedly mixed. It can take a decent photo, but it does take a lot of work in order to make that happen. And the dual lens, it wasn't great on the M8, and, well, it's not exactly a go-to feature, I think, on this device either. For me, ZTE spent money in the wrong places. The Snapdragon 810 processor is a very expensive beast. The QHD display, also quite pricey. To me, if they'd gone with a 1080p display, maybe an IGZO, like Meizu's offering, that would be more interesting to me. The camera's a little too average, and the build actually isn't that great. As you can see, I have extensive scuffs for using it for 2 weeks where the paint is actually coming off. To me, the Axon is a no-go right now. I think that the build quality needs to be a bit higher, the camera needs to be more improved, and at a $400 price point, I will take a lower processor and a less high-spec display in order to get those features a little ramped up. For me, if you're buying an unlocked phone, going with something like a Meizu or a OnePlus, if you're looking for a budget device, might be a better option. If you have picked up a ZTE handset, please let me know your impressions in the comments. And if you've got one of these, let me know what you think. I'm your host, Nicole Scott, for Mobile Geeks. If you haven't had a chance to hit like, I'd really appreciate it if you did that. And, well, you're always free to subscribe.